Hi, everyone. Welcome to the first installment of Scribbles from the Basement. Today, I'm going to be ruminating on complexity. Now, complexity is something that I think is very important, particularly given the world we live in today. The more connected things become, the more complex and adaptive the environment we operate in. If you looked at the year 2008, when we had the global financial crisis, and you looked at if you looked at the Hang Seng Index or the FTSE or the New York or anywhere else, what we would have seen was ba-doomp, 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 ba-doomp. It was like one global heartbeat, and that's because everything is connected. And when things are connected, it's hard to predict what's going to happen, and then you can get an outcome that you don't necessarily desire. So as the world becomes more connected, it becomes more complex, and as it becomes more complex, we need to learn a little bit more about complexity theory. Okay, so let me just kind of draw a little image here that will hopefully help understand what we mean by complexity. If we can always determine the outcome, right? If we have high outcome determinism, meaning that it's like if you're playing pool and you have an easy shot, you know exactly how it's going to come out, right? And if we know how to manipulate the environment, in other words, I know exactly where to put the cue, then I have a high context, which means I am in a simple operating environment. I know exactly what the outcome is going to be. I know exactly what it is I need to do or what environment I need to manipulate. And in that instance, I'll know exactly what to do each time. Now, the opposite of that is if I don't know what the outcome is and I don't know how to manipulate the environment to get to that outcome, I have a condition called chaos. Chaos would be like Rudy Giuliani in New York after the Twin Tower event, where we'd never seen that kind of environment before, and we don't know exactly how to deal with it, right? Now, between simple and chaos, we have something called complicated. And something called complex. And these kind of go in a continuum, if you will, kind of simple, complicated, complex to chaos, right? And so one of the things that most organizations today that I speak with, when I ask them, where are you on this graph, and how complex, what's the operating environment that you tend to be in? They tend to be on this side of the spectrum. They tend to say either my world is completely chaotic, or my world is, complex. It's hard to figure out what's going on. Right now, the important thing to understand here is that there's what I call a complexity chasm between the world of simple and complicated on one side and complex and chaotic on the other. And this becomes very important for organizations because what works in one context will not work in the other. So if we want to kind of draw a little bit of a distinction, right? As we are in the chasm, right, of complexity here, when we have high outcome and things are, either simple or complicated, we know what's going on. And in that world, we can kind of plan, we can predict, we can de-risk. Those are the kind of things that we do. We do a lot in this world. This is kind of the world of analysis, and it's in the world of execution. Whereas on the other side, we have to observe. We have to really look for patterns. And we have to look then for progressions. We don't exactly know what's going to happen. So we have to be quite aware. We need awareness, right? And we need exploration. So that's the difference, right? If I used the blue over here for the world of kind of complex and chaos, and let's use like maybe a red over here for the world of kind of getting stuff done. These really are two different environments. So if this here is the environment you're operating in, and you're in a complex or chaotic environment, you need a different type of leadership response than if you're down here in the complicated and simple, right? So most organizations today, if we think about a teeter-totter, say that, you know, there's a little bit more weight coming here. And so the teeter-totter is moving in this direction, seesaw. So things are leaning towards more complex. So if I'm a leader of an organization, I have to, number one, become mindful and ask myself, just like a musician, what key am I in? So what operating context am I in? What's the operating context? Is it simple? Is it complicated? Is it complex? Is it chaotic, right? And the second thing I have to say is, how should I respond given that environment? Because if you're going to try to respond to a complex environment with the tools of kind of planning and analysis and prediction, it's not suited over here. That would be like trying to play golf with a tennis club. The tools of leadership and management that work on this side do not translate over here. So a type 1 error is you misdiagnose your context. And many leaders do misdiagnose their context. Einstein has something called the law of requisite complexity, where he says problems should be broken down into their simplest form, but no simpler. And sometimes we want to break something down to a more simple form than is required, or than is prudent given the complexity of the environment. So that's kind of type error type number 1. Type 2 is, even if we say, yes, absolutely, we're dealing with this kind of environment, we tend to still want to apply this type of leadership approach to that. So at the end of the day, we need ambidexterity in our leadership approach. Over here, we want to move fast, we want to test, we want to keep things within tolerance, we want to, all the things that we learned about the golden triangle with PMIs, we want on scope and in budget and on time, that kind of thing. But over here, we have to have a much more open approach, a much more networked approach to make things happen. In a way, what we have here is the hierarchy works very, very well to get this kind of work done, but it doesn't work very well to get this work done, because this work is more of a networked kind of serendipitous set of interactions. And out of that, a pattern will emerge, and then that pattern might lead to a progression, which you're not sure what the outcome is going to be, but you kind of have observation, pattern, progression, question mark. And when you identify one of these progressions, then you throw it over to the hierarchy to get done. So one final thing here is, if you want to talk about John Cotter's research, this is the side of the hierarchy, and this is the side of the network. So that's my little riff on complexity and what it means for organizations. We started by talking about how, as the world becomes more and more connected, the world becomes more and more complex. We defined what the difference is between simple, complicated, complex, and chaotic. We discussed how both sides are not the same, and that you have to manage differently. And we talked about, very specifically from a leadership perspective, how to avoid type 1 and 2 errors. Type 1 error is misdiagnosing your context, and type 2 is trying to apply the wrong leadership system approach to that context. And how in the structural world today, a hierarchy works well on the left and a network works well on the right. And so leaders need to perceive, sense make, and choreograph differently in the left-hand side as opposed to right side. Hope that makes sense. That was a little musing on complexity and what it means for organizations and for leadership. Hope you enjoyed it. Talk to you soon.